Hey y'all, I'm Carolina Tony. Today the road brings me to Cherokee, North Carolina. We are here at Oconaluftee Indian Village. This village is recreated to represent the 1700s. And we're going to go on a tour and learn how the Native Americans, particularly the Cherokee, lived during that time, what their houses looked like, what kind of food they ate, tools they used, all that stuff. And you get to come with me, but right after this station identification. Oconaluftee Indian Village. Oconaluftee Indian Village is an authentic replica of a Cherokee town of 1750. Here you will experience the ways of the Cherokee as they practice their traditional arts such as basket weaving, wood carving, finger weaving, pottery, weapon making, and cooking. Inside the village you will see contemporary Cherokee people as they demonstrate their traditions in an 18th century setting. Let's go.
We have Miss Lauren, and she's working with commercial yarns right now. Before these yarns, there were only two types of materials we used. The first is mountain bison hair. Now, mountain bison were indigenous to this area until about 1790. They were killed out due in large part to the fur trade. Now, they would have been about the size of a dairy calf today, much smaller than the plains bison you're used to seeing out west. We also used the Indian hemp plant or milkweed. Now, the fibers were taken from the inner stalk of the plant and completely dried out. From these fibers were twined together. The third and oldest weave is called the oblique weave. With the oblique weave, it makes use of glass beads to put the designs in the belt. They could work with anywhere between 10 and 200 strands at one time. This is an example of a 200 wide piece. These would be sewn together to create a blanket or a shawl for the winter time. Now, blankets. Here at beadwork we have Miss Angela, and she's working with a steel needle, flax thread, and glass beads. Now, before the introduction of these materials, if you'll look right up here, to create the needles we would take the straight deer leg bone right above the hoof and shatter it apart. From there those pieces would be shaved down using a flint knife to form bone needles. Now again, for thread we use those fibers from the Indian hemp plant or milkweed. Copper pieces would be used as decoration. Copper pots were trade items from settlers. Once they were worn out, we repurposed them, making them into different adornments. And this would be used to decorate men's or women's clothing. It would be sewn down the sides of men's leggings or pants, or along the borders of a woman's skirt. The second type of beadwork is the solid work. Now with the solid work, you'll start with a single row of beads at the beginning. From there you'll go to the next row and alternate going back through each other bead, adding only one bead at a time. This ensures that the thread passes through all of those beads twice. Read. Here we have Miss Diane, and she's working with clay that is now outsourced from Asheville. Back then, to get the clay we used, we would go to the riverbanks, and we would dig about 1 foot to 1.5 feet beneath the topsoil. There were two methods in creating the pottery. The first is the ball method, and that was used for smaller pieces. You would just take the clay, form a ball by rolling it between the palms of the hands. From there, sticking your thumb down into the middle and working your way around with the other 4 fingers. There were no potter's wheels used back then. Everything was done by hand and still is. Now the second method is the coil method, and these would be used as our cooking vessels, our pots and pans. You started with a flat disc of clay creating the bottom. From there, coils would be rolled out lengthwise, and those were stacked one on top of the other until it reached the desired height. Just a small version here, they would be much larger. Then to form a solid piece, you would smooth between those grooves with your fingertips or a damp cloth. Now once you'd made the pottery, it would be set out to the sun to dry a little bit until it reaches a slight chalky color right here. Is that where you're at right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Along the way as it dries, as you'll see, you'll use different tools to carve different designs into it. Before settlers arrived, we would use flint knives to carve rudimentary wooden tools just to design them. The corn cob was also used. You could take a corn cob and roll it around the outside of the pottery, giving it that textural pattern. Shells were used. You could imprint the surface of it onto the outside of the pottery. You could also use this natural arc shape up here to create designs like that. Natural shiny finish you see here, rubbing the stone with a bit of water on the surface, also taking out any scratches or imperfections. From there you would start the firing process. You would make an open fire and place the pottery around the perimeter with the opening of the pottery facing the flames. That was key because we had to waterproof these cooking vessels that we used. Again, taking the corn cob, making sure it was completely dried out, you would crush it up into pieces and place that on the inside. Now the heat from the fire would release the corn oils, making it waterproof, similar to how you'd season a skillet today. The final step was placing the pottery directly into the coals of the fire for about 10 to 12 hours, or until the fire completely died out. To get different colors, we would use different types of woods in the fire. For a lighter color, you could use a hardwood because it produced more flames and less smoke.
Yeah.
Now here at wood carving, we have Mr. Lasbear. He's working on a piece, what is that, buckeye?
Poplar.
Oh, poplar. He's working with poplar right now. To create our masks, we would typically use buckeye or poplar because it was a softer wood to carve and easier to use. Now, before the introduction of these metal materials, we would carve our masks from the bark of a tree using a flint knife. The wolf here on this end. Guarding gourds were also used, the top part forming that natural beak for the bird. Now the back halves of these gourds were turned into bowls for everyday use. And inside the bowl is what we would have used as a spoon and a fork. For the spoon, a hollowed out mountain bison horn. And for the fork, a piece of river cane double pronged at the top. Then once settlers arrived, we tended to copy the utensils that they used. The gourds were also used to create water diggers. The handle up here, cutting off the front part and then scooping up the water, full of a gardening tool that was used. The piece of flint here at the bottom would be attached with animal sinew, and the staff here is made from the rhododendron tree with the natural curvature there. After European settlers arrived, they taught us blacksmithing, and our gardening tools look more like this one. As I mentioned earlier, we did trade with coastal tribes to get different types of seashells used in a number of ways. The tips here would be chipped off, and that piece could be sewn onto your clothing as a button or a type of adornment. The rest of the shell would be used to create whitewash. This was a type of white paint that was used in peace or purification ceremonies. You would place the shell into a fire. Once it was brittle, you could crush it up, mix that powder with water or some animal fats, making a type of white paint. The settlers also brought over with them the brass pots that we used in cooking. When they were worn out, the men repurposed them by cutting them down into strips like this. They'd be polished up with some leather, and then worn on the upper arm as a cuff or another type of adornment. This was our bling back then. Now for the pipe pieces, we would use soapstone and pipestone. Soapstone, easier to carve, found readily in this area. Pipestone, a lot thicker and denser, harder to work with. Now this one does have the 7 sides for the 7 clans of the Cherokee. Each clan leader brought forth their own stem that was carved from sourwood, very sacred wood to the Cherokee because it blooms 7 times a year. Those stems would be placed on the clan's designated side. Now, a form of tobacco was used back then, but it was very harsh. You could not inhale it, it would collapse your lungs. So the smoke would just be drawn into the mouth and forced back out. And to get the holes in the pipes, we used what's known as a bow drill or a push drill. The flint piece, shaped like an arrowhead, that was interchangeable. You could switch it out just like drill bits today. And the wooden wheel would be replaced with a heavier stone wheel back then to counterbalance the weight. I'll show you how it works. Go down the hill at basket weaving. Just watch your step going down through here. There are some roots sticking up there now. Now here at basket weaving, we have Miss Naomi. She's working with splints of white oak right now. The white oak was gathered as a young tree sapling. Now, when I say young tree sapling, they usually got about the size of this post right here. Be cut down into different sections. From there, cut down into the different size splints you see her working with. Now she used the knife to shave along the grain on both sides of that splint until it reaches a piece manageable. We also use the river cane material. Now it does grow by the riverside, so it stays pretty moist and pliable. It does look like bamboo, but that's where the similarities end. Bamboo is a lot thicker and denser, harder to work with. This river cane will take about 12 years to fully mature, so you can't work with it up until that point. You'll split it completely down the middle, from there splitting it even further into the different size splints that you want to work with. On the inside is a white husk that can be peeled out. You'll go between these joint areas, bending a little bit right there. Just peel off that husk, and then you can use a knife to shave it down even further. Only on the inside. We left the outside alone because of that shininess. And that's the outer part of river cane baskets you'll see being made today. 1952 from hickory tree bark from the village first oak. Over 60 years old and still intact. Now, to get different colors in the baskets, we had a few different things from nature that you could use as dyes. You would place your splints and your dye of choice into a large basin full of boiling water for a certain amount of time. For a yellow color, you could use yellow root. It's in the same family as golden seal. It does have some medicinal properties. For a red or orange color, bloodroot was used. Now, fresher pieces have more of a bright blood red color all the way through them. For a brown color, you would use the bark from the walnut tree. And for a darker black color, the bark from the butternut. For a piece of white oak to take these darker colors, you have to boil them longer, anywhere from a few days to a week. Here at Weapon Making, we have Mr. Kevin. Hello. He's working on some spearheads, spearheads and arrowheads using flint and obsidian. Now that flint could be found, the flint material could be found anywhere between Kentucky and Tennessee. You'd quarry it out, break it down into smaller pieces. From there you would use a smaller river stone to flint knap along the outer edges. This just chips it away and gives it a more generalized shape. Now from there, to refine these pieces, you'll use the sharp point of a deer antler, or once metal tools were introduced, the copper pieces he's using right there. And you'll use that to pressure flake, which is what he's doing now, pressing very firmly along the outside ridges. This is what gives the final shapes that you see on these two arrows right here. Now the first type of arrowhead is the round-shouldered. It would be used for big game hunting like bear or deer. Because of the roundedness of that arrowhead, they were easier to retrieve from the animal. Less meat was lost, and you could reuse the arrow. We would also attach this arrowhead with fibers of the Indian hemp plant. The second type of arrowhead is the high-shouldered. These were used mainly for warfare. Now, if we were ever outnumbered during a battle, the bow and arrow were used as a means of defense. Of course, this was made from the obsidian material. This was a volcanic glass we traded with South American tribes to get. Before settlers arrived, we traveled as far north as Canada, as far west as Texas, and as far south as South America for trade. The obsidian material was very sharp and delicate. Once it hit bone in the body, it tended to shatter and break. So, you'd have to use one of those flint knives to dig out the pieces yourself. Killed them, giving them that much respect. So we would use what's known as a war club, and these would be carved from a single piece of wood. They would also be the same length of the warrior's arm, wielding it from wrist to shoulder. These items were made to your specifications. That way, if you were ever disarmed in battle, no other person could use that because it was made for you. Some warriors also went as far as embedding the larger spear points or arrowheads into the front ballpark here to create even more damage. But we were a peaceful people. We never sought out war. We were just very well prepared for it. Used for smaller animals like birds, rabbits, or squirrels. You would place grain or seed around the base of that trap. The animal came along eating, knocking the figure 4 loose. The trap fell on top of the animal. Now the lid was removable, so you could just reach in and grab the prey without it escaping. The final trap is the fish trap. It's still under construction, sorry about that. These would be placed in the rivers in the area with the opening of the trap facing downstream. It would be lodged into place in the riverbed using stones, and the stakes there in the front would be held in place using pieces of leather. Once the leather became wet, it naturally loosened up a little bit, allowing those stakes to flow back and forth freely. So the fish were able to swim up into the trap towards the back, preventing from swimming back out due to the sharper points. Living teepees was more of the western Native Americans. Of course, we had the mountain bison in the area, other animals to hunt for food, so we didn't have to travel far. This is an example of a Cherokee home that was built in the 1800s. At that time was the French and Indian War and the Revolutionary War. Cherokee homes were burned down, so they had to be rebuilt fairly quickly. As you see on the end, the logs are just notched together. And there is a mixture in between the logs of clay, animal hair, or straw, acted as a type of insulator. On the inside, you'll see the blankets lining the bed. They were trade items from the Canadian tribes. Iron cookware brought over from settlers. There is a drying rack on the inside far wall. And that was used to preserve our meats back then. In these homes, there is a storage area that goes across half the room up top. And you can have a look on the inside if you like. Of course, there were no doors back then, so you could take an animal hide or fur, place it over there. And that would be the only good light that came into the house, was the light from the door. Of course, you didn't spend much time in your homes back. Time of peace. You'll see there's a front porch added to the front.
These were built in the 1750s.
Of course, we had more time to create these homes. The logs are hewn to form on the sides. On the inside of these homes, there is a loft area that goes across the entire room. That was used for extra sleeping quarters. Typically, a Cherokee home could house about 12 people, and there were about 200 homes in each Cherokee village. You can have a look on the inside. Sweat house, or as we call it, an Aussie. Each Cherokee family had their own sweat house, literally just dug out from the earth, and that was used as sleeping quarters during harsh winter times. Excuse me. The medicine men had their own larger sweat house in the center of each village, and that was your doctor area. So the patients were laid on the inside benches. The stones you see there in the center would have been heated by fire on the outside, then rolled back in. The medicine men would pour an herbal tea mixture over those stones. There is an example of an 18th century trading post. Cherokee villages usually had a few trading posts in them. The prices and the weight scale would be delegated by the tribal members as well as the European settlers that came over. Lost track. Your main currency back then would be the buckskin, as you see the two hanging up here. You know the phrase today, you're going to the store to spend a few bucks. That's where this comes from. Buckskin was your money. So with the exception of regular animal furs, those would be weighed on a scale, and 2 pounds of regular fur would equal to 1 buckskin. Beaver hides were very pricey back then as well. The European settlers were making them into waterproof felt hats, and 1 beaver hide or otter fur would equal to about 5 buckskin. Here, this is actually the first spork. I saw that the other day, it made me laugh. Sorry. The pocket watches, and of course the lace ribbon that would be sewn onto clothing. We were all about self-expression back then. We just liked to make ourselves look pretty.
This would have been the ceremonial portion of the village, and each one of these huts represent the different clans. This is the long hair clan. The Wolf clan. The Deer clan. The Wild Potato clan. The Bird clan. And the Paint clan.
And wipe from a crush and burnt seashells. Not only that, you can see that the clan mask, it is painted in red and black. That is what our warriors will wear when they go to battle. The red will signify strength and power, while the black represented death and hatred. Now, depending on how much he wore of one of them, will depend on his attitude towards the battle. So if he wore more red than black, that means he's asking for more strength and power in his battles.
Okay, well, I hope you've enjoyed our visit to the Oconaluftee Indian Village. Is that right?
Oconaluftee.
Okay, he says a whole lot better than me
Which
because
actually translates to waist deep. It refers to the river here in Cherokee, the Oconaluftee River. It comes up to about waist deep.
cool. Well, he was our guide, and I am more knowledgeable now than I was before. Again, I want to thank you for joining me. If you're ever up in Cherokee, I highly encourage you to come by and take the tour. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give me a big old thumbs up. Be sure to tell your family and friends. And until next time,
Dedadagahayu. And that means until we meet again, whether it be in this lifetime or the next.
and y'all have a good day.